Hello and welcome to Lab Roots, the Life of Her Mind, an interview series devoted to learning how women think about their research, their field, and their future. Let's get started. Today, we are in conversation with Shilo Nelson, professor of kinesiology at Pierce College in Woodland Hills, California. Full disclosure, Professor Nelson and I are longtime colleagues at Pierce, and I've long been an admirer of Professor Nelson. You are going to see why very soon. In addition to her academic work, Shilo is a yoga instructor, a certified personal trainer, and a competitive bodybuilder. Previously, she served in the United States Air Force and was a cheerleader for the Seattle Seahawks. While earning her master's degree from California State University at Northridge, Nelson began teaching in CSUN's Kinesiology Department. In 2010, she began teaching at Pierce College, which was just down the road from Northridge's campus. Eventually, she became the chair of the Kinesiology Department. Welcome, Professor Nelson, and thank you for taking time to give us a glimpse into the life of your mind.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I don't know how much in my mind you want to see, but here we go.
Let us have it all. All right. So if I've got my chronology right, you followed in your parents' footsteps by entering the military service first. Subsequently, you became a professional cheerleader and then a kinesiologist. How did these seemingly diverse endeavors come about? What brought you to military service, either in addition to or apart from that was what you grew up with by way of your parents? How did you get to cheerleading? How did you get to you?
Yes, both my mother and father were Air Force, and so that's how they met. And then, so I grew up the first few years of life in the military, and then my father got out and we moved to Washington State. So I'm a transplant from the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest when I was 7. And so I grew up there. So I consider that home. And so upon getting ready to graduate from high school, my parents were like, yeah, I think the military would be good for you. You not only make money for school, but you'll get to see the world. You'll grow up a little bit quicker, and it'll help you, I think, do better in school because you'll learn a little bit of discipline and you'll get a lot of benefits. You are a veteran. And so I kind of kicked and screamed a little bit, but I ended up going into the military. I think it was the best decision I could have ever made. I enjoyed the people that I met. I'm still friends with a lot of people. I only did 4 years, so I've been out for an extremely long time. But I'm still friends with a lot of people that I met in the military. So I made a lot of lifelong friends. I did grow up really quickly. And sometimes when I'm interacting with our students that are like 18, 19, I'm like, why can't you? And then I have to think back. I was in the military at that age. There's a difference between being in the military at 18, 19, and going straight from home to college. So I have to catch myself with that sometimes. But once I got out of the military, I was working at a department store and I was going to college using my GI Bill. And I was working for Clinique. And so I was doing makeup. And my boss looked at me one day and she said, I think you should be a Seagal, which is what the Seahawks cheerleaders were called at the time. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, a cheerleader for the Seattle Seahawks. And I laughed. I was like, they suck. Who cheers for them? Because they were really bad in the 90s. I'm like, they actually have people that cheer for them? She's like, that's not the point. The point is you have discipline. You were in the military. You know how to work hard because you were in the military. So you do hard things, and this can be a challenge for you. It's something completely out of your wheelhouse because I never took a dance class in my life prior to that. And she's like, and it can open doors for you. You can meet a lot of really good people that can help propel you forward, and you'll make lifelong friends. So I hoomed and hawed, kicked and screamed, and got in my car, drove to Seattle, and went through the tryouts. And I was one of 6 people to make it. Out of over 200 women. So I was very surprised. So she's right. I do hard things. and I've made lifelong friends. as she said, because I just did one season. And after that, then because I took a year off from school and I knew that I needed to finish school. I put stress on myself to finish school by a certain time. Because by that time I was 25 and I was like, oh my gosh, my class reunion's in 3 years. I cannot not have a college education by that time. And so I left Seattle and then consequently I went to school and I got my degree in kinesiology at Eastern Washington University, which is in Cheney, Washington, right outside of Spokane in Eastern Washington. That's where I did my undergrad. And I found fitness while being in the military because that's a part of military life, staying fit. And I would go to the gym and I had a roommate who had been a bodybuilder. And so I started working out with her, and that's how I learned to lift weights. And then I had an aerobics instructor who had lost over 200 pounds. And so I would take her classes and she would carry her picture around and she would always share her story. And I found that just fascinating. And I was like, well, what books did you read? Like, what did you do? How did you do this? And so I would go to the library. I don't think people do that anymore. I would go to the library and I would check out the books that she had read. And I would read the books and I would look at the credentials of the people who wrote the books. And I was like, what is this exercise science? What is this kinesiologist? What is this physio? What are these long words I can't pronounce, essentially? But she was always happy. And I was always happy when I left her exercise class. And so it was something that planted a seed. And then fast forward, I got into teaching aerobics, personal training. And then I'm like, well, I want to be the person that writes these books and teaches people how to do this. How do I do that? And hence getting out of the military. The first person I met when I went back home to Washington State, her name was Amy, and she had graduated from University of Idaho with a degree in exercise science. So I was like, that's what I'm looking for. And she said, yes, that's what you're looking for. She had been in the Army. And so, so she kind of helped me on my path. And then fast forward, here I am.
So you a couple of times, both major moments in your life, the decision to go into the military, the decision to try out for the Seahawks. You mentioned kicking and screaming. What was it that why the kicking and screaming? What was happening?
Change. People are afraid of change. You're comfortable. I was comfortable at home. I grew up in a good family, in a good neighborhood. I had everything I wanted. Why would I want to leave that to go and be yelled at? Why? I could have my mother do that. I know her. Why am I going to have a total stranger do that? So that was part of it. The fear of change, the fear of being away from home, fear of doing something hard. And but my parents were like, you've done hard things your whole life. And, they went through scenarios of things that I had done. And they're like, you can do this. Mm-hmm. And it's just only going to propel you forward. And so that's what I cling to, the fact that it's going to propel me forward. And then when Margaret, my boss at the clean counter said, try out for Seahawks. I'm like, well, I've never taken a dance class. Mm-hmm. I'm not a model. I don't have tall rocket legs. I'm only 5'4". So all these things are like in my head. And she's like, you can do hard things. You're just in the military. You have the discipline and the skill set. She's like, you teach aerobics. You have some sense of rhythm. You know how to count to 8, apparently. And so, she said the worst case scenario is you don't make it, but you meet people and you put yourself out there and you tried. Mm-hmm. So you weren't afraid to fail because it's not really failing. You're learning something. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, that goes back to what my parents said is only going to propel me forward. And so I just kind of relied on that. And so then that's when I went. But it was just the fear of change. And, I just gotten out of the military at that time. And I thought I was doing good. I was going to school, using my GI Bill, doing what I thought. I didn't think there was anything else. My vision was kind of narrowed. I didn't think there was anything else for me to do. And she was like, no, there's more out there. So scoot. And so.
And you did. and one of the things that I think is really interesting about what seems to be this, wildly diverse or divergent paths, right? Military not, working at the makeup counter, but while you're doing that, you were already studying kinesiology, if I'm not mistaken, and you were already, trained as at that point, not as a yoga instructor, but you were teaching aerobics and then physical fitness, right? So it seems like the Seahawks would be really a divergent path from what you did in the military, but you've made this really interesting connection. Like they're both grounded in discipline. They're both grounded in, physical strength and control of your body and understanding your body. So I wonder, was understanding your body, or was being comfortable with fitness, exercise, sports, whatever, was that part of your childhood?
No, actually, I did not play sports growing up at all.
Okay.
My mom was afraid of me getting hurt, and so I did not play sports. And then once I got into high school, she was like, "Oh my God, you have nothing to put on your college application. You need to go do something." And I'm like, "Well, I had to learn how to play sports in junior high. There's no way I'm going to even make the JV team at this point." Because she had no concept of it. And I think my dad, he said he wrestled in ninth grade, but then that was it. So neither one of them really understood the value of sports in schools, and all the skills that you learn that you don't learn in a classroom necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I just went and tried out for the cheerleading squad in high school, and I was a high school cheerleader, but not the ESPN kind. It was more like the go kind.
I know
something that pretty much anybody can do. If you know how to clap and you know how to make a fist and do this, you could have been on my squad.
Okay, so there is at least a little bit of a connection between what became the season of Seahawks and high school. So you weren't.
Yeah. Yeah. The Seahawks, and they're really, professional cheerleaders are really dancers. That's what they are. They are really dancers, and everybody had a dance background, but this one right here. So it was a challenge. I started taking dance classes. I paired up with the best dancers on the squad, and it became another job for me. I worked part-time at the clinic counter in Seattle. I transferred from one mall to another. And then I had my practices with the Seahawks. And then I literally probably put in another 20, 30 hours on my own. I didn't know what a pas de bourrée was. I didn't know what an inside and outside turn was. I'm supposed to point my toes when I kick. Like, what is that? We don't do that in aerobics. And so it was a completely different animal. It's like if you aren't a tennis player and you go out there and you're like trying to teach you how to play tennis, and it's just different mechanics and motor skills that I wasn't used to. So it was definitely a challenge in that way. But, having at least teaching aerobics and understanding the fundamentals of movement, at least that was helpful in making that leap. And it was a big leap, and my toes weren't pointed.
So, all right. So, obviously, you've had a lengthy career outside of academic life. You mentioned earlier that one item in sort of developing your work and your major was sort of seeing who was writing the books that you were reading, right? How is that part of what sparked your interest in going on to graduate school specifically for kinesiology, or was there some other motivation that brought you to the classroom in your discipline?
For when going to grad school, I was living in Portland, Oregon at that time. And so I was working for a fitness chain, and I was their group exercise coordinator, which simply meant I ran the aerobics program. I hired, I trained. And while doing that, I also worked for a national company. When you're in the fitness industry, there's many different certifications to have. And there's different certifying bodies. And so I got hired by a company. The acronym is AFA, AFAA, which stood for, because they've now since been bought out, but it stood for the Aerobic Fitness Association of America. So they were one of the certifying bodies. So in fitness, we have the American College of Sports Medicine. That would kind of be like the Surgeon General in the medical field. So we have the American College of Sports Medicine. And then under that umbrella, you have different certifying companies. And so if you, Mia, had a gym, you'd want to be sure that your trainers and instructors were certified, because it's a liability for you. And so I worked for one of those companies. So I got to travel the country certifying people to work in these facilities. And so I was doing that and running like 3 or 4 different gyms for 24-hour fitness at the time. And I was like, wow, I want to make more than $36,000 a year. I want to buy a house, and I'm getting paid as much or less than people who are trainers who don't even have my same amount of education. But yet they're learning from me, because I'm the person that's teaching these certifications. That made no sense to me. And when I would go to argue that, when it came to promotions and, getting salary increases, my education didn't mean anything to them. And so they're like, we can get someone like you that's just certified. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be the person that writes this stuff. How about that? And so I started looking around at graduate programs. And then a friend of mine slipped me a job from Nike, because I lived right next to the Nike campus in Beaverton, which is like a suburb of Portland. And I would drive past the Nike campus every day going to work. And so I was like, let me look at this job. And so I looked at the job, and the job required a master's in kinesiology. And it was working with designing clothes and shoes for Nike. So they wanted someone with an emphasis in biomechanics, which falls under the umbrella of kinesiology. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go and change careers then. I'm going to get out of this fitness, and I'm going to get my master's, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to get hired at Nike, and I'm going to work at Nike, and I'm going to make double $36,000 a year. And that's my goal. And so off to graduate school I came. So it's the mere motivation of just being insulted by not being paid my value.
Yeah. I mean, so you're reminding me that I think I've heard before that the fitness industry is notoriously a low paying industry for employees, for the experts. Do you have, why? Do we know why? Why is that?
I think with the fitness industry, the gyms take a lot of the big cut. So many times when people don't have experience, like I'll tell people, go and work at a gym to make your mistakes under somebody else's umbrella, somebody else's insurance, under somebody else's liability. Make your mistakes there. And then also you'll have people there that you can learn from. And you'll come across a lot of different populations, because many times they just feed you new members. And so you have no idea whom you're going to be working with. And so learn there and then move on and work for yourself, because then you can make more money. And so that's what many people do. So they work privately. I mean, I'm in LA. I mean, these trainers are charging $100, $150 an hour. And if you're a celebrity trainer, you're getting $200 an hour. To do the same thing that the person at 24-hour fitness getting $25 an hour. Right. But now you're not sharing with the big box clubs. You're actually taking that money in for yourself and doing whatever you're doing with it. So I think that's where it is, because many of these gyms know that once you become really good, you're not going to stay there. You're going to leave. And many times you take those people, your clients, with you, even though you're not supposed to. Many times they come with you anyway. And that's kind of how it goes. So they know they can get another one just like you.
So it's sort of a cultural and historical situation. Okay. And then
I mean, when you go into the high-end clubs, it's a little bit better, but it's still not the same as if you worked for yourself. Like I found that out when after graduate school, I worked for myself as a trainer, and it made a lot more.
And the other striking feature of that period, the other striking feature of that problem is you mentioned that you had this education and certifications more so than, let's say, somebody else working alongside you, but that didn't give you any greater compensation. So so curiously enough, in so many, in a number of areas in academic life, people make less than they do in corporate life, right? So they'll leave academic. It's almost like leaving the service to make more money. But in the case of fitness and exercise science, it's the other way around. So, and then you mentioned again, I'm going to write the books and the manuals and the curricula for these certifications. What intrigued you about that process? Like, why do you think that piqued your interest repeatedly?
Because I like to learn. I always laugh that if I could go to school for someone and just let the information transfer to them, I would. I'd be a career student. I was just actually having that conversation with somebody last night. So I like to go to school. I like to learn. I'm just, I don't want to say I'm a nerd because that has like a negative connotation, but I mean it in a loving way. And so I just like knowledge. I love the human body. I think it's fascinating. You can make the body do anything, like literally anything, with the right kind of training and nutrition and rest. You can make the body do just really magnificent things. And so I like to read about that. And I also am a student of movement and movement quality. That's what keeps you safe. And you see a lot of, I like to watch people walk. I'm like one of those strange people. And I like to watch how people sit. And, they're like this, or, like this, or they're like this, I like to look at body language. And then you should start to look at mechanics a lot of times. And then it becomes like a little bit of a puzzle. Like, I think that they have shortness on this side, they have tightness over here, they have weak this, and this is why they're having these kinds of shifts. And I like to understand and study that because that's really important to know when you're working with somebody one-on-one. And so having been like the aerobics coordinator and training people and working for AFA and training people in fitness and movement, I was always very meticulous about how you approach movement and how you taught movement to people, because that's really important to keep people safe. When people are safe, then they continue, and then they see results. And as they see more positive results, then they continue. And it just goes on. Then they become happy. Then they become self-sufficient. And then they, so there's just nothing but everything that's positive. So being somebody who can help, like, be an educator in that field, because that's the basics of exercise, is movement and motor patterns. That to me was very interesting. I really felt like I was very good at really kind of educating and teaching and parlaying that information to people to be successful when I work with my clients and when I teach classes. And I like seeing a light bulb go off. And so I'm like, well, you got to write the material and write it really well in order to actually teach that material, in order for people to take it and move on. So I always felt like it was a responsibility, since I have the book knowledge, to be the person to kind of help facilitate that. If I answered your question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. And it actually leads beautifully into how you. So I know you started while you were in grad school. You were a grad instructor, but how did you end up going down the road to Pierce, and then fast forward, you're chair of the department. You're, if I'm not mistaken, effectively, I don't know if I want to say rebuilding. You'll share with us kind of how that happened, but or what was involved. But how did it happen that you landed at Pierce and then became chair and sort of rebuilt the program?
Okay, so let me give you polite version of how I became chair. Because this is going out there in the ether. So, but no, I was a grad assistant at CSUN, and I was also a grad assistant when I was an undergrad too, which is very interesting because what I had found out, because when you study kinesiology, you don't learn to be a personal trainer or an aerobics instructor. Like, you don't take classes in that. You go out and you learn that on your own. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a part of the curriculum. And part of the curriculum is your chemistry, your math, your physics, your kinesiology, your biomechanics, your physiology, your anatomy, blah, 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 blah. That's the core meat of it. And then some movement type activity classes, and then pedagogy. Mm-hmm. And so that's the meat and potatoes of the degree. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to go into fitness, you have to go and get that information on your own. Mm-hmm. And usually people come to this field because they were athletes, with the exception of moi. They were athletes. And so they want to go back and coach and do these things. And so they go out, they get a degree in kinesiology, and then they go out and get these additional trainings. And so what I found is that none of my professors were proficient or had the knowledge of how to teach movement classes.
Ah.
Yeah. So I was like, what do you mean you don't know how to teach aerobics? What do you mean you don't know how to personal train? Well, they knew their subject. They knew the physiology. I took a lot of cardiac rehab classes at Eastern. So, she could teach me how to read an EKG, but she could not teach me how to make my legs stronger, and so she might have understood the fundamentals of it, but putting it into action was completely different. Mm-hmm. And so that was how I got my jobs, because I was actually doing that first before coming to the university. I was already in the field. And so they were like, oh, you have this skill. So when I was an undergrad, they're like, yeah, you're grading them and you're giving them grades, but don't tell them that you are a peer of them. And I was like, okay. And so here I am grading my peers. But because the professors didn't know how to teach these classes, I ended up with it. That's how I got my graduate teaching or graduate assistantship at CSUN. Same thing. They're like, oh, you're already an aerobics instructor and personal trainer. Oh, you're already certified. All right. So I didn't get the exercise science labs or the biomechanic labs that grad assistants got. I got all the activity classes because that's what they needed. You needed somebody who was actually doing those things. So that ended up getting me the job. I first started in the district at Mission College, actually.
Yeah, I did too.
Because I got a phone call from this lady. I later got to know her as Cindy Cooper, but at the time, I just got this person on the phone that was just like, "Are you Shilo?" I'm all, "Yeah, you called me." and she said, "Yeah, I got your name from so and so and so and so. Do you have your master's?" I was like, "Yeah, I just graduated." And she's like, "Okay, you are a trained aerobics instructor." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm certified in such and such, such and such, and I work for them." "Great. Can you start next week?" I was like, "What?" I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea who I was talking to. She's like, "I need you to show up here." And so I drove out to the campus and I met her, and she was very nice. And they sat me down and they made me do all the paperwork that the district has, and then gave me some keys and said, "Start teaching." And I was just like, okay. I mean, luckily I don't know, I'm good at what I do because that's how I stumbled into all my jobs. And that from there parlayed into working at Moore Park College because they needed someone to teach mat Pilates. And because they didn't have people who actually did it in the field, they had people with master's degrees, but not people who actually had the actual application part of the activities that they were looking for, the fitness ones. They had a lot of people who have played basketball, soccer, baseball. They had a lot of those people teach those classes, but the fitness classes are just a different animal on their own. Mm-hmm. And so that's what got me in. So when there was that opening for peers, because I was actually working full-time downtown for the Army Corps of Engineers, I was their wellness coordinator. So I was working for the government and still teaching as an adjunct at Mission. I applied, and there was over 100 applicants that applied. And remember I was at a meeting, a kinesiology meeting, and everybody was talking about they were applying for this job at Pierce. And a lot of them had PhDs in kinesiology in their little areas and stuff. And I was like, why am I even going to bother like applying for this job? I'm not going to get a job over a PhD person and somebody who's already been in, teaching at other campuses. And a lot of them were full timers already in the district and kinesiology, but I applied anyway. And in my interview, the job description was written, the qualifications and that you have to have in the district for the discipline of kinesiology with an emphasis. And they rattle off all these fitness things. They didn't say like basketball or anything like that. It's all aerobics and yoga. Yoga was the big thing. And I was a trained yoga teacher. And that, I think, of course, I'm a personality, landed me the job. And so fitness and being proficient in that I believe, was the biggest part of why I'm even here today in the district, and landed me all these jobs at the colleges, because I'm an anomaly. Many people have the book knowledge, but they don't know how to do the application. If you say, what's 32 count phrasing, you'll get the deer in the headlights. If you say, how do you choreograph a step class, you get deer in the headlights, and then how do you do that for multiple skill levels and keep everybody looking the same at the same time and keeping everybody in time? I mean, that's a whole different skill set that you don't learn in the classroom. Did I answer your question?
Well, and it sounds so I don't know the proper terminology, so it sounds either like you've blended two disciplines. I know you talked about skill sets, right? Either you blended two disciplines, or what you do is applied kinesiology. So you understand, the theoretical and scientific. You practice how that plays out in actual movement, whether it's yoga or aerobics or something similar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was going through my undergraduate, I was personal training as well. And I could study for my test while training my clients. I'm like, okay, bring your elbows in. You're going to do a little elbow flexion. You're contracting the long and short head of the bicep. And they just thought I was so smart, but I was really studying. I was just regurgitating my notes while I was training them. And so, but what was really neat. I mean, again, I can't speak about other disciplines other than maybe a foreign language discipline. We're actually using the language. Like if you go live abroad and you use the language in a natural setting, you're able to take that skill set and apply it in the classroom. Okay, here is the grammatical way of writing and saying these words, but this is really how it's done conversationally. And this is what you really sound like. Don't sound like the textbook when you go to France, because they're going to look at you all weird. You want to sound like this because you had the experience of maybe studying abroad in France and being in the culture. And so it's kind of the same thing with the kinesiology. So it's a little disheartening sometimes when I go to meetings on any campus, really, and interact with different disciplines. They really just think you're kicking a ball and catching a ball, and that's all you're really doing. It's like, nursery school playtime. It's kind of how they look at you. And it's like, no, I don't think you can do what I do. You teaching the people auditory, visual, and kinesthetically all at the same time, crossing language barriers, skill sets. I remember I asked a woman to bend her elbow and she moved her foot. I was like, so I had to go and bring her hand and go like this. Oh, I wasn't doing anything vulgar, but you know what I mean? I just realized what that looked like.
No, but it worked. You played it beautifully.
But, because a lot of times people don't even have that connection with themselves and how that works. And so when you have to teach that and keep people moving and have them have a good time and make it accessible and make the exercise fun, as well as movement achievable. I mean, it's a completely different animal. So yeah, it is blending. It's blending all the knowledge and skill set and then applying it to that body in front of you. And sometimes that knowledge and skill set and that book smart goes out the window, and you have to adapt to that body that's in front of you and figure it all out, not just physically, but just and mentally and emotionally too. So all that comes into play too. And then when you have I used to have a kickboxing class that had like 70 plus people in it. And, to keep 70 people moving in time and keeping them happy and keeping and managing that and having that control, it's a different skill set.
And because it's incredibly individualized, but you're doing it in a group. And then that leads me to, my next question. It's almost like we practice this because you just lead right into the next one. I do have one follow-up, but I don't want to break that flow. So I'll try to remember to come back to it. But right. So you're talking about having this sort of cohesive group while you're doing this sort of individual work, right? And then March 2020 hits, right? And we all, go where we are right now, which is, in the Zoom meeting. And, so one of when I was thinking about, my own discipline in relation to a discipline that requires a lot of complicated movements and learning how to hold positions and just, whether it's yoga or anything else. I was thinking, oh my gosh, how are, people in dance or kinesiology, how are they doing this? So how did you make the transition and apparently do it so seamlessly? Because I came across a video where, it was like May of 2020 or earlier. And you were like, come on, we're doing this. Everything's, we're going to do this together. It's going to be great. And I wasn't surprised because it was you. But at the same time, I'm thinking, there were so many people who had such a hard time to transitioning. How did you think about and then execute making your classes, your kinesiology classes, work in this online environment?
I think it helped me make it better. Actually, I used still a lot of my work that was on Zoom or online, I should say, even now that I'm back to my face-to-face classes. So when it initially happened, it was like, and okay, I got to film myself, but I can't get myself at all these different angles. I don't have a husband, and neither one of my dogs know how to hold a phone, and so and the cat's no good either. And so I'm like, who's going to get me at all these different angles? And so I spent a lot of time finding videos online that had movements in different angles, and they would show somebody doing it, the regular way, and then right next to them in a little box insert would be a modified version of that exercise, kind of like how I would teach it in class, and so, and I'd have the students film themselves, and I would give them feedback, but I'm like, I have to give them more, so I was lecturing more and filming them, or I was finding additional TED Talks and things to kind of give an emphasis to what I was talking about, and then writing lots of questions or giving them articles to read and giving me summaries and more writing work that I didn't necessarily do before. And that kept their interest. In my yoga classes, I really delved deep into the philosophies of yoga, which the writing I was getting back from students, like how they were going through being depressed and, feeling just hopeless, that writing was very helpful for them. It was almost therapeutic. It was like journaling. And that's kind of what they would say to me. And so I found that actually kept them coming back and kept them interested was the actual, not just discussions with each other and with me, but the actual additional work that I was giving them that I didn't necessarily do in person to that depth.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kept them more engaged,
Mm-hmm.
and they were actually learning more about the human body. They were learning more about nutrition. They were learning more about how to take care of themselves when it was like the fitness-based classes, and then filming themselves and actually getting feedback, because they would actually have to make like some of the corrections in the movement. So then, when you're teaching to a group of people in front of you and you have on a headset and you make, you say X, Y, and Z, be sure to keep your shoulders back and down and your arms up when you're teaching a kickboxing class. Well, nobody thinks you're talking to them. So they're just doing this. But when I get your video and you're down here doing that, and I'm like, I give you feedback, then it's very specific. And so then you have to make that correction. So it kind of, I think, helped people in their fitness aspect. As far as like with the yoga classes, it helped them, a lot of students I found, more emotionally because of the philosophy writings and learning like the limbs of yoga, and really kind of dive deep into how you treat yourself, how you treat others, how you interact. When you start talking about the 8 limbs, and you break it down to the yamas and the niyamas, and how you interact with the world, how you interact with yourself, and giving them additional readings and prompts to write out, it really helped a lot of them. And so it helped me to keep those students that were brave enough to go on that journey of being in a virtual environment. And so now I've kept a lot of that now that I'm back face to face. And the feedback I get now is that they enjoy the more online stuff that I'm doing than the actual practical class itself. So that's why I say it's actually made me better, because it forced me to actually dive that much deeper, not just into the subject matter, which of course keeps me more up to date because I have to find up to date things, because I'm no longer teaching the certifications out there anymore. But then it kept me just more in tune with myself too, and how I was feeling during this time as well. So,
well, and is am I right to think that one of the good things about coming back to campus is goat yoga? Or is that something? I mean, do we do that again or no? And to anybody not from Los Angeles and not having ever been on the Pierce campus, can you explain how goat yoga came about, what it is and how it came about?
goat yoga was started by a lady named Lainey, was it Morales, something like that, up in Oregon. And she was doing like birthday parties on her farm. And so, she had animals and everything. And so people were like, oh, this is really great, and this yoga teacher came to her and said, how about I, teach a yoga class here on your farm? And so she did, and she taught, and there were like little baby goats walking around. And so the lady, Lainey, filmed it, sent it into her local like farm newspaper, and then it just blew up from there. So that's where it actually originated from. And so people think it's this magical thing of doing goat yoga. There's, here in Los Angeles, there's puppy yoga, there's cat yoga. And so there's all these different things. So what you're basically doing is you're teaching yoga, because at Pierce College, we have our farm. And so we have goats. And so I taught a yoga class because they called me or sent me an email, and it was during the week of finals. And so they wanted to do something for the students to kind of help calm them down during final exam week. And they said, would you teach yoga here, would you come and do goat yoga? So I'm like, great. So the first time I did it, it was a nice sunny day, and the little baby goats were walking around. They try and eat your hair. They try and eat your clothes. They eat everything, apparently. So instead of a lawnmower, get yourself a goat. And so that's how it started happening. But what I noticed is that they poo nonstop.
Oh.
Luckily, I didn't get any poo on my mat and step into it. But then I was kind of like, nobody talked about the sanitariness of this. And so, but it was really nice. And the whole premise of it is that it's not only outside and puts you in touch with nature, but animals have a very calming and therapeutic effect. Mm-hmm. So not only do you have yoga itself, but then you add in animals and being outdoors and nature. So it kind of, helps with anxiety, helps with stress. You're kind of boosting your immune system because you're decreasing cortisol because you're decreasing stress, and you're bringing in those happy endorphins. Who doesn't like cute baby animals? I mean, unless you're just a crazy, weird person, right. Who doesn't like baby animals? And so it has that effect to it that makes people gravitate towards it. But they do poo a lot. So, go ahead and try it, but don't wear your best shoes. Don't wear your good shoes. Don't wear your church shoes.
That your approach to the story you told about moving from being in the same physical space with people, with your class members, to being in the virtual environment, how you adapted, and then the story you tell about goat yoga, is just reveals that you're game, right? You're like, what is something that I can do to make what I'm doing better for the people who are involved? And that's just, I think, such a, like a testament to the quality of your character, because you're you're genuinely in this for the ways that it can benefit all aspects, of our lives. And it also reminds me of this other question that I wanted to ask you about, kind of who is kinesiology for? Like, what I'm hearing from you is that yes, from the standpoint of the fitness side of things, we have, current or former athletes. And then, from the academic side of things, we have the if you will, the more the science-y types, right? But that kinesiology is really a great way to blend both the theoretical, scientific, and the practical. And so it seems like, it's for anybody. For example, someone I was working with is thinking about becoming a chiropractor. And I said, oh, well, have you taken any of Professor Nelson's kinesiology classes? I don't know about kinesiology, but my suspicion is that, yes, you're going to learn everything from, anatomy to motion, and right. It's the root of the word, right? So all of this to say, kind of what is your advice to someone who is kind of lurking around but not in kinesiology, who should get involved in that discipline?
We want everybody, because we want people in our classes. We want our FTES. Oh, I'm sorry. I digress.
There's that too.
Yeah, there's that little small part. Well, we at the community college, the way, and that's like a whole different story of how the 2-year degree was written. You get the introduction to kinesiology from us, and it breaks the discipline down into the philosophy of kinesiology, to the sociological aspects of it, to the psychological aspects of it, because psychology, sociology, philosophy, all of that falls into it. Because, we had to take, I had to take some, I forget the name of it. It was a sociological aspect of kinesiology. It was some class I had to take like that in grad school, so it was taught by a kinesiology professor with an emphasis on sociology and just how the discipline works, within social groups and things like that. And so, it dives into many different disciplines. Kinesiology does. And when you're like looking at people wanting to get into it, I tell students, because they think, I like to exercise, so I want to study kinesiology. I'm like, well, you better like math and science. I'm not good at math. You're not going to do well in these classes, because in your biomechanics class, you're going to have to know, you're going to have math through like trig and stuff. You're going to have to learn how to figure out, if you hit the ball here, which way is it going to go and how fast is it going to go? I mean, you need to know how to do that. You know, I don't know if people use calculators anymore, but I had the big scientific one that you could bicep curl, the real heavy one, you know, second function. Yeah. You know, you have to put that in. And so, and then I tell them you have to take anatomy classes. You're working with the human body. You know, what is this? What is it attached to? What's the joint action? All right. So I was listening to a trainer talk yesterday at a workshop where he was trying to explain the strength and where you're stronger. You're stronger here than being there, and you know that's basically lever lengths. All right, so you're talking a little bit, and that's about biomechanics, which is again math and a little bit of physics, and so people need to have that understanding that that's what the discipline is. And then you have to take the physiology classes, which means you have to have had chemistry, because now you start talking about metabolism and what the carbs do, what the fats do, what the protein do. How do you fuel the energy system? So if you're writing a program for an athlete, what position does that athlete play? Are they using an anaerobic system? Are they using an aerobic system based on the sport? Now, how do you write their strength training program? How do you write their program for when they're in season versus when they're coming into season versus when they're kind of going out of season? And so there's all these different things that people don't think about when it comes to kinesiology. So I'm glad that you like to exercise. I'm glad that you grew up playing 10 different sports throughout your entire life, but you can't take you and put you on somebody else. You've got to understand the discipline, the math, the science. Yes, I had to take English classes. I had to learn how to write. I had to write a program to give to somebody. But I also have to know how to adapt things to that individual person. And sometimes you got to scrap everything that you learn and then figure it out. At least you have the basic knowledge and figure it out with that body in front of you. And many times it's the emotions that you're dealing with people than really the physical that you're dealing with people. And you're dealing a little bit with their psyche than more so than dealing with their body. So anybody who wants to come into this field has got to have that understanding. It's a lot more than teaching them what you know how to do. You really need to teach them what they want to do, but keeping in the back of your head, okay, there are certain things in order for you to get there that I know you need to do. So now I got to tailor what you need to do into what you want to do. So you think you're getting what you want, but really you're getting what I want you to have. So like when I get a female client who just wants to work her legs and doesn't want to do her upper body at all because she doesn't want to look like a man. And I'm like, you don't make enough testosterone. I can't believe people still think that in 2023. But I'm like, so unless you're on the juice, it's not going to happen. And so you can eat and lift and curl a house. It's not going to happen. And so I'm like, okay, great. So you want to work your legs? I'll give you dumbbells because you need to have additional weights for your legs. But then I'll have her lunge with the dumbbell curl and a shoulder press. Like I'll sneak that in there.
I was about to say, you're sneaky.
Yeah. I'll have her do step ups and a trunk rotation with a medicine ball. So I'm getting that upper body or an overhead shoulder press. So I'm getting the upper body in there. But her focus is, I'm doing my legs. So I'm giving her what she wants, but I'm also giving her what she needs. But I have to know how to do that and put that in there without it being so obvious or it's about my agenda, going in there. And people need to really have that understanding. It's not really the physical so much as it is dealing with an actual human being. And then also knowing that, I got a few tests with some D's, because it's very hard that math and that and doing those long, we call them, wall problems in chemistry, where you had to convert things and to get to the end problem and then having to redo those tests and going to office hours because I really had to have an understanding because I'm going to be working with a human being. And I've had students who thought about kinesiology and then I see them years later and they changed their major. They went into sports management Because they realized they couldn't do the math classes, or they realized they don't like science that much. Mm-hmm. And so I would tell people, you got to like math and science, make friends with it, but you also have to know how to interact really, really well with human beings in order to be successful in this career. Did I answer questions?
Yes, and you have been very successful in this career. So, well,
I try.
What?
Because I try.
Oh no, you do. Professor Shilo Nelson, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I don't know how you find time to do everything you do, but taking time from your schedule to share a little bit of the life of your mind with us. I appreciate you and thank you for all that you do. And I hope that we'll be able to chat again soon, and maybe we'll do some, tell us a little bit about how bodybuilding has fit into all of this.
Oh, yeah, that too. The roommate in the military, that was the bodybuilder. That's kind of where it started.
Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate you. And I hope that I get to see you sometime soon.
Okay, sounds awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you asking me.
Thank you.